Well, my name is Matthew Wilson. I prepared this probably very short little talk here on, I guess, just describing some of my efforts to implement Perl 6 on the .NET platform. I'll just jump right in then. Let's see. There it is. All right. Okay, so first, who here has some familiarity with Perl itself at all? Okay, about 75, 80% people raise their hands or so. So here's, this is probably not terribly representative, but the black line here, I don't know if you can read it, is Perl, or jobs that mention Perl in their job descriptions, as tracked by Indeed.com. Green is JavaScript, over the past 4 years or so, and .NET and Java. Now, of course, .NET may be exaggerated a little bit there because of the genericness of the word net, but maybe not. As you can see, PHP, Python, Ruby, VBScript, PowerShell, Lisp are down here, there.
Up and coming, baby.
What's that? But I don't have a point to make with that, other than you can. There's a lot of ways to interpret that, and then explain those trends. So here's a bit of a trivia quiz. A couple of questions, really. One of them I don't know the answer to, and I'll be asking the audience for it. But first one is, who here? Well, don't shout out yet, but I guess vote on the answers. But the architecture of the Perl implementation, as it's built. Which one of these four options most accurately, most closely describes its implementation?
Perl, all of them.
So we have one person saying the first one. Okay. Anybody? Any other options? No. This is Perl 5. This is existing Perl. As it is now for the past 15 years. Okay, so consensus then on the one answer of A, or the first option, I guess, not hearing any other answers. Well, it's actually B. You can precompile, the interpreter can precompile to a bytecode. It does run on a VM in Perl on the interpreter. And it's actually not exactly correct. The bytecode is not entirely cross-platform. It is dependent on the way the compiler is built per platform. But it could be cross-platform if it's built exactly the same way. No, it's not C and it's not D. No. So, okay, here's the one I don't know the answer to, but I've read that Perl is used quite widely inside Microsoft, but I figure with plenty of Microsoft people here, you can probably tell me. I've heard it's used in build scripts and test harnesses. Anybody tell me how widely it's used? Maybe a few product groups, 10, 20, 50? Don't know. Not willing to say. Won't admit it. Okay. Oh well. So
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. So here's the last question here then. There's two kind of major distributions of Perl on Windows. Active Studio is Active Perl, and then Strawberry Perl, which is a largely open source one, or entirely open source one. Now, question, is there a Microsoft distribution of Perl? Does Microsoft distribute and build and support a build of Perl 5?
Can we support active Perl?
Okay, besides Active Perl, there is one. It's distributed with Interix, or what used to be Interix, add-on to Server 2003 and higher. It's a build of Perl 6, or 5.6, and so there is one. So a little bit of history of the language. It was announced in 2000, the next version, Perl 6. Announced in 2000, there was an RFC process, lots of mutually contradictory proposals. Then there was a very extensive series of apocalypse revelations of the language from the language designer Larry Wall, and others, and then some exegesis explanations of of the language, or of those revelations, I mean. And then now we've arrived at the synopses. And while I'm describing these, you can go to this URL here if you have access to the internet, and you can look at the various documents that are there. But the synopses are what are now called the specification of the language. They define the human readable specification for the language. Now, when one of the implementations, Pugs, was around or being developed heavily, there were some other documents classified as Apocrypha. So anyway, go to this URL if you want more details on those documents. Right. This slide here, it is that implementation, Pugs, is implemented in Haskell with a lot of libraries in Perl 6 as well, and it is still maintained. It's still distributed through Hackage. Its creator still updates it and uses it for plenty of things, but it's not trying to track with the official Perl 6 language anymore, from what I can tell. The other implementations, Recruito Perl is on Parrot, which is a cross-platform dynamic language VM, written, well, bootstrapped in C. And it's called Recruito Perl, and it currently, by far, has the most attention and effort and progress recently as far as implementing the language. And if you go to this URL here, you'll see descriptions of the implementations and a bunch of other related projects. SMOP, small matter of programming, also written in C, is a competing implementation, I guess you would say. STD, well, it's meant to be standard. It's the parser, the Perl 6 parser that Larry has written in Perl 6 with a translator that translates it to Perl 5. But it can parse itself. The Perl 5 version can parse the Perl 6 version. And it's also a deparser. It can go back and produce the original deparsed version, byte for byte, identical to the original source code. ELF, there's another implementation on Perl 5 written by Mitchell Charity. There are others. And then mine is a very naive, amateur attempt at implementation on the Tycho programming language, which you'll hear about shortly. There are a couple of parsing novelties with Perl 6 that make it kind of tricky to implement. First is that it's fully dynamically parsed. That is, the parser really runs or controls the runtime. You can import modules at compile. It's called at compile time, but it's really creating a call to go out and link to the parser and pull in another program that may be itself compiled that can affect the parsing. And so as you're using your program that's written in Perl 6, you can import another language. You can switch to another dialect of your language and just start using it. Now, this is just nonsense, but on this line here, but it could be a language. And this is the reason why, it doesn't make it uncompilable, but it does make it kind of tricky to set it up to be compiled. So the goal is to try to make it still able to be parsed in a single pass. So here are a couple of resources to look at for you. This first one here, this first link is Jonathan Worthington's site. He actually wrote for his dissertation, wrote a converter of IL bytecode to Parrot bytecode. So you can read about it there, but he also has tons of slide presentations on Perl 6 overviews. That's why I'm not going into the language itself here, because it would just take hours and hours and hours and hours, even to just touch on the highlights. It's a very deep language and wide, I should say. Also, this site here, ircpugscode.org, tracks the conversations on the IRC channel, which really is where a lot of the communication takes place. If you want to follow the development, that's where it is. So on to my implementation. Initially, it's using a parser written O-meta sharp. And I'll show you a bit of that grammar in a second in Visual Studio. And I found it very, very, very well done. I've been very pleased with that. I've tried several different other implementations of PEGs, or parser generators, and this one I found to be quite good. The Prelude is written in Taiko language, and it does just plain old naive, like I said, source translation to Taiko code against the Taiko API. But I'm going to switch it to use the Taiko's dynamic lecture and parser when it's ready. And you'll hear about that in a second, hopefully. And of course, the built-in types are going to be written in Perl 6 as well. So for as far as the DLR goes, currently Taiko runs its own VM, but will be targeting the DLR in the future. And that's that. Where is this? I guess Visual Studio crashed. Oh, no, here it is. So, yes, running as administrator, as you can see. So, well, that's not it. Here's the Perl 6 grammar in Ometa that I have so far. And, come back. So it's kind of involved. It's not a simple grammar at all. The C# grammar that Ometa generates is like 4,000 lines, I think, currently, or a parser it generates. But Ometa is not set up to do dynamic parsing yet, but that's why I'm going to switch to Taikos. All right, well, I don't really have a demo. I have a very rudimentary REPL REPL implemented, but don't need to show that. Please talk to me if you have any other questions or discussion points. I'd be glad to discuss. If you have any questions, feel free to say them now, if you'd like. Nope, okay.